Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. Well, today we have like an oldie but a goodie. This is a really fun and easy technique to do, and it looks pretty cool. I'm going to start off by using a couple of inks. I have In the Navy, Key Lime, and Powder Blue. These happen to be Gina K inks. I am using a couple of blending brushes, but honestly, you don't need inks. You don't need this specific inks. You don't need these colors. You could add almost any media that you were comfortable using. You could even use acrylic paints. You could use watercolor pencils. You could use watercolor markers. You could use alcohol markers as long as they didn't bleed through. You can use pigment inks, hybrid inks, dye inks, whatever you feel comfortable with. Now, I am going to put a little scrap piece of paper. I sort of bend it in and around behind here so it covers both. And then we are working straight onto my card base. That's why I am protecting the back there. I'm going to do a little bit of light inking. Now, I always test with when I'm using my blending brushes, I always test on the side as to how much ink is actually loaded on the brush. And actually, even with this green one here, I haven't even loaded it up yet, and there was still, almost enough ink to do what I needed to do. But because I often don't know how much ink is A, loaded onto my brush before I even get there, or B, like left over from last time, or B, how juicy my ink pads are, and that is going to make a big difference. So never come straight from your ink pad into your project, because often that's when you'll end up with splotches and things if it's just a little more than you were expecting. Now, just to add a little bit of texture to my background here, I'm going to add the Flip Flop Circles by Hurley Create, and this is just a little bit of background texture, so any stencils are going to work here. Then I'm going to bring in the Folk Flowers stencil from Paper Rose, and this is actually a new one for me, so I just keep them in the packaging. I cut off the top, and that way I can pop the stencil in and out nice and easily. And this one is really just, a little bit of floral notes happening in the background. You will notice that I am only working on the right-hand side of my card front. The other side looks a little bit interesting. And I think this is one of those cards where you're going to be like, this is interesting. This is, I'm just not sure. This is not. No, but I promise you, this is going to work out okay. This is going to actually be a gorgeous, stunning card. So that's all we have to do for that one. We can put that to the side while we work on the other parts of this card. So I have got these dies here. These are the layered butterflies. I actually don't know if these are available at scrapbook.com anymore. But these are little bows here. This is such a gorgeous little pretty bows from Syberia. This would work well. Honestly, any dies that you have, you're soon going to get the gist of what would work. And so many different dies are going to work. So many shapes. You could have flowers, love hearts, birds, bugs. I don't know. There's just so many different things. So I am taking a card front and I'm doing about a ruler's width. I'm just drawing a little pencil line. This is what helps me. You don't need to actually do this. It's also so that you can see what I'm doing as well. Now I'm going to take one of those butterflies, and I want 3 to fit here. So I'll take a little bit of mint tape, which I will just hold this down with as it goes through my die cutting machine. I will die cut that one, and I want 3 butterflies. So I will pull this one out, keep the insides because we're going to use those too. And I'm just making sure that each one of these butterflies crosses that pencil line that we created. And honestly, with this card, there's actually lots and lots of variations that you can do as well. You can make them floating, you can separate them, and as usual, this way is just one way because there is always another way to do things. So I thought I would show you this one way today, and that is a good place to start. Now, with these little butterflies here, I'm actually going to just erase off that pencil line because I went right through it with all of the butterflies. And then because I want to use these as well. So I'm going to poke out all these little pieces. They come out really well, really nice and easily. I've got a little pokey tool and they just pop out quickly. There are obviously tools out there that do this as well, but I have a small craft space. So my tools have to do lots of jobs. Now I'm going to take this panel here and cut down that pencil line. This is a little bit sad. It feels a little bit sad, but it's going to be okay. And the piece that we cut off, if you can make sure to cut this off in one sort of clean slice, then you can use that right hand piece and do almost the same technique but in reverse. So you can actually use both of them. Now, the reason that I use the guillotine rather than a sliding trimmer is just because with the sliding trimmer, I have more chance of sort of catching. If your blade is not 100% sharp, then you've got more chance of it sort of catching and, just not doing exactly. Whereas if I use the guillotine trimmer, I have a way better chance of just a clean swoop through there. Okay, now at this point, I thought I wanted to add a little bit of shine to my butterflies. So I have used some sticky embossing ink, the Versamark. Then I have used some clear embossing powder on these. And then to give them a really good shine and get rid of any of those lumps and bumps that you get sometimes, those pits that you sometimes get when you are embossing, I did 2 layers of embossing on them. Now, I'll come back to that in a moment, but that is important. Now, this set happens to come with a layering butterfly. So I am going to sort of re-go over the die cuts that I've already done to make them the layering size. You do not have to do this. If you do not have the layering one with it, then your shapes are just going to nestle back in there perfectly. If you have the shadow die like I have, then there's going to be a little gap. You'll see a little bit more what I mean when we put the card together, but it is absolutely not essential. Now this time I have remembered to stamp my sentiment before I put on any foam tape or glue this to my project. I have the Simply Sentiments, the thank you. This is from Pinkfresh Studios. Now, as usual, this is actually an older set. I think it's still available, and always I will have things linked down below. If I can find them, if they're still available, they will be linked down below. But you know how it works. Any good sentiment is going to work in here. I just want one that's sort of nestled in nicely and stacked so that I could get it down that little left-hand panel that I have. So this one is going to say, grateful for you. And I think this is a little saying that is going to be, it caters for a lot of occasions. And I am not always making cards specifically, for an occasion or a person in particular. I make a lot of cards, and so I just have a great wee stash here that my friends and family can come and raid and take and use as they wish. Now, here are the butterflies that I created. So these ones have the gorgeous heat embossing with the clear embossing powder. I want to show you, I have cut out 3 more butterflies from exactly the same paper, but you'll notice how the embossed butterflies actually have changed color. They are a completely different color and they're not that bright white anymore. And I mean, that could be due to lots of things. My embossing pad might not be the cleanest, my embossing powder might not have been the cleanest, or it just changes the colour. It just soaks the paper from underneath. Perhaps I could have given them a chance to dry because obviously that Versamark has sunk in, there's liquid, there's all those sorts of good things. So these are just not quite the right colour, so I decided to change directions, and what I'm going to do to get that little bit of dimension and a little bit of interest, I'm going to layer up 3 butterflies for each of the butterflies. So I die cut out 9 more, and I'm just going to layer these up using a little bit of liquid glue so I can shift them into exactly the right place. You could have put foam tape underneath here, but because the dimension sort of lies with the butterflies, I want this bit to be nice and flat. Now, if you wanted to, another way to go about this would have been to create a mask with the dies and use that for the ink at the very beginning. But, that's sort of going down a different route altogether. Then I decided to add in a little bit of a wonky border as per usual. This one's extra wonky because, wow, I was not going straight today. And that's the beauty of a wonky border, is that it's not meant to be straight and no one's going to know that, and it still looks gorgeous. So I just took this is one of these scrapbook.com fine liner pens. It puts out a little more ink. It's a little thicker than my other ones. And I quite like that because my sentiment is a little bit thicker and a little bit bolder, so I wanted something to match. And then here is where I'm going to put in my little butterflies. So if you have the floating layering elements to it, then yours are going to sit like these are. If you don't, and you're just going to use the original die cuts, then they're going to nestle neatly back in there. So it's up to you. So it's kind of like, it looks like a bit of a partial cut or floating elements. I just really like it. This is an oldie but a goodie. Now I could finish up here, but there's a couple more things I think I would like to do to this. I think those butterflies are just calling out for a little bit of embellishment, and I could have used black, that would have fit in really nicely, but actually I found my Nuvo drops, which I have not used in a minute, and we may as well use them, otherwise I'm sure they will eventually dry up or eventually change their consistency. So this is like a blue glittery Nuvo drop, and I'm going to add that down the centers, and then I'm also going to add a few little drops on the actual card. Now I do want to slow this down. I'm going to do this one right here in normal time. And you see I sort of like push down, push out some product, and then I really swirl to the top to get a nice, a nice finish on the top there, so to speak. I know lots of people have trouble with this. So in my opinion, it's all about the finishing swirl. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And if you're looking for any of the supplies, as usual, they're down in the description box. But I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.